Hello, friends. My name is Tiffany Babb, and this is the Interesting Jobs podcast, where I talk to people with interesting jobs about their day-to-day, popular misconceptions about their field, and what they wish more people understood about their jobs. Today, our very special guest is Graig Kreindler. So, Graig, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I am a painter, an artist, I guess, who focuses on historical baseball subject matter.
You have a painting behind you. It's slightly in view. Is it finished? What are you working on?
Oh, I've got a lot going on at once. What you're kind of seeing in the background is like stuff from like the work area that's kind of spilled over because the amount of canvases I kind of have going on at once is it's a bit daunting. But nothing behind you here is finished. It's kind of just there are various stages of completion, and it's kind of like, oh, I passed by it and I got to get back to that. And maybe I'll get back to that next week or whatever. And I feel like I say that with every single canvas that I have in here, then feel guilty when I don't get back to it in a week or whatever.
So how do you decide which project you're working on at a time?
That's a great question. So the majority of the work that I do is on commission, thankfully. So what I try to do is focus on the order in which the commissions come in. Something that obviously was commissioned, say, 5 years ago or 2 years ago or whatever would have precedence over something that was commissioned last week. However, that being said, there are certain projects that might occur that are very time sensitive, where maybe a client has paid, a rush fee, or maybe it's something that is kind of like a commercial job, and sometimes those people can kind of jump the line. And also there are times when I'm kind of just doing paintings for myself that, just kind of interest me. Oh, this is a good break from whatever commission I have going on at the time. So I really try to do it chronologically in terms of, when I guess the request comes in, but I'm not perfect, unfortunately.
So since we're audio, we're also video, but since we're mostly audio, describe your work to someone who's never seen one of your paintings.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's tough. I don't know if I've ever had to actually describe my work. The majority of the reference that I use, the stuff that my paintings are based on, the majority of it is black and white photography. And what I try to do is kind of breathe life into those black and white photographs by, creating a painting in full color. Not so much a Ted Turnerizing of it, but, more so I want the viewer to kind of feel like that they're actually there watching the scene or watching the play or at the game or whatever. It's been described as being photorealistic. I guess it is kind of photorealistic to an extent. Some of my color choices, I think, have also been kind of described as being impressionistic, more so with, I guess, the actual content of the color, not so much with how it's applied or anything. But I don't know, I tend to think of myself as someone who kind of straddles in between both of those things because, I do kind of like to stick close to the photograph that I'm working from, and just in terms of historical accuracy, I want Joe DiMaggio to look like Joe DiMaggio, and Yankee Stadium at such and such year has to look this way, and that sign has to be the right color and whatever. But at the same time, I'm also very concerned about the quality of light that is kind of being depicted, or that I'm trying to depict myself. So I'm concerned with how that light will affect color and edges and things like that. So it's kind of like two sensibilities that are fighting, or maybe not fighting with each other, but they're trying to work together to make something happen.
So you're talking about working from black and white photos, and your paintings are in color. How do you figure out what's historically accurate color-wise?
Well, that's a complicated answer because it kind of depends on the photograph or the subject of the photograph that I'm working from. If I am doing a painting of, say, Joe DiMaggio with the Yankees or whatever, it's easy for me to kind of look back and find out what the Yankee jerseys from that particular year might have looked like. Baseball is one of the best visually categorized and archived sport I think that we have. And, there are a lot of anal people who are really into the sport, and I think that they've really kept track of a lot of this stuff, which is very helpful to me. I can always kind of find whether there are some color photographs of, say, DiMaggio from like the late 40s or early 50s, or there might be, existing jerseys from when he played that are in kind of private collections that I have access to, photographs of. And in a lot of cases, there are also home movies that you can find, whether it's on YouTube or, in my case, I have a connection with the people who produced the When It Was a Game series for HBO in the early 90s, which is basically a story of the game from the end of the Depression into the late 1960s. And it's told all through fan and player home movies that are pretty much all in color. So I'm able to kind of draw from that archive of stuff. And, when you go back, let's say you go back further than DiMaggio, you get back into Babe Ruth, or you go deep into the early 20th century or back even into the 19th century, there's a lot of guesswork involved, a lot of educated guesses that have to be made. The same thing even applies with, say, painting some of the Negro Leaguers and Latin American leaguers from the 20th century, where there aren't really many existing photographs or many existing kind of, artifacts from those leagues. So, yeah, there's a certain amount of guessing that I have to make that, sometimes is tough because I might not be 100% about the guess and whether it was the right way to go, but I try to remind myself that I'm doing my best and that no one is perfect, but I really want to be perfect.
I totally get that. And we've talked before for my website, The Fan Files, and you told me, tell us the story of what you do when you find out that you've got something wrong on a painting that you've sent to someone.
Oh, man. Well, there are instances in which I might choose the wrong color for something. Usually it's not something related to the specific subject, so it might not be, say, Joe DiMaggio's facial features or his uniform or something. It might just be like a really small thing that I got wrong on like one of the advertisements in the way background of the painting that's, out of focus or whatever. There have been times, I don't know if I want to say how many times, there have been more than a couple of times where I've contacted the client who will own the painting, if it was a commission, and I will ask them if I can have the painting back to make the correction. This happens most of the time. When it happens, it's like a couple years after the painting has left my hands, where like some bit of information might kind of come my way that I didn't have access to before, where I'll say, oh, here's a color photograph of Yankee Stadium in 1939. I didn't have access to that before or whatever, and I realized that I did this sign wrong. I'll email them, very sheepishly and say, I know that this might sound a little crazy, but would you be willing to send it back if I, pay for shipping and all that stuff? There's just this one thing that's wrong, and I would really like to fix it and just make sure that it's right. 9 times out of 10, they're cool with it, and they say, oh, well, that's great that you're willing to do that. That's what makes you you, and don't think that you're crazy, even though I feel like they're probably saying that I'm crazy under their breaths. But yeah, I mean, even now, like I have a running list of some paintings that I might have to kind of contact the owners of and possibly get back to make some changes. And thankfully, I think the majority of them are small, so it's an easier prospect when they're the small ones. The larger ones, I know that I'm probably not going to get back.
That is fascinating, and I think it really speaks to your dedication to getting the history right, which I think not everybody cares about, and it's maybe something I wouldn't necessarily care about as strongly as you do. But I think it really speaks to your values and what you prioritize in your work. It's fascinating. So for someone, let's say, the average person, I think, doesn't know what a painter does day to day. So what does a regular day at your job look like?
A regular day at my job. The regular day kind of varies from day to day. It'll usually get started after my kids are gone from the house when they're going off to school. It might kind of start with me going on the computer and answering a couple emails, talking to a client, or even trying to kind of secure licensing rights to an image or something like that. Maybe a little research might be sprinkled in there. But I try my best to get started with painting, like as soon as I can, just so I can get into it, because I know that, after, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or whatever, I know that you start getting controlled by that X factor and you get into the zone, and a lot of times I just want to be there so I can A, feel comfortable, and B, just kind of get stuff done. But I'll get to work as soon as I can, and I'll paint for a couple hours, and I'll take a break here and there, to kind of rest my eyes or rest my legs or whatever. And usually around that time, I might have a little lunch, or I might go to the gym, knowing that, whenever it is that I come back, I'm just going to have a little bit of time to get back to painting before we have to pick up the kids or whatever. And when they come home, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, because I want to be the present father and everything, but at the same time, I do want to get back to work and finish working on whatever it is that I have going on. So I feel like when they're around, less stuff gets done. I do try to also jump back into things when they go to bed. So, it used to be when I was younger and the kids were younger, it used to be they'd be out by 8:30, 9 o'clock. And I could put in an extra, 2, 3, 4 hours a night. Nowadays, I feel like I can maybe get in an hour and a half or 2 hours, on a good night. But yeah, it's a balancing act, because there are also other days where I'm not doing any painting, where I might be doing canvas prepping, or I might be going to my photographer, or I might be meeting with a client, or I might have to do a drawing. A lot of times, the drawings that I do are done from a digital projector. I try to do that at night, because the light is better and it's easier to kind of see what I'm doing, and my kids are asleep. So there are some drawings that I spend hours and hours and hours on in the middle of the night, and, I might not even sleep. As I'm finishing up, the kids are getting up and getting ready to, go to school or whatever. So it's always different, but I'm always busy, I never ever feel like that I need to think about what I'm going to do, or I have to look for something to do. There's just always something to do. There's always a painting that needs to be started or finished, or, worked on, or whatever. It's very dynamic in that sense. I try to look for, patterns and schedules and routines to kind of create, but I find that the only routine is that the routines get broken.
Yeah, you work project to project. I am curious, because you work in oil paint, right?
Yes.
So for readers who aren't well versed in the world of painting, oil paint doesn't cure immediately like acrylic dries. So you're working with wet paint. When you're starting out, are you mixing all of your paints? Or are you mixing to each session? How are you dealing with the paint situation?
Well, so what happens is I have a palette with, I think it's 12 colors. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I have a set palette, and I pretty much just stick to those colors, and I'll put out new paints pretty much each session, or maybe every other session. And I'll kind of just mix as I go. Sometimes, mixing actually happens on the canvas and not necessarily on the palette. But there are certain things that you kind of have to consider with oil paint that you might not necessarily consider with acrylic paint, because I guess the natural qualities of the oil paint always keep the medium, that's the word I'm looking for, they always keep the medium kind of in motion, the chemicals are always reacting, whereas I feel like, in acrylic paint you kind of just put it down and it becomes plastic and that's it. But it's different with oil paints, and it kind of matters what kind of like the hierarchy it is that you're following and the steps that you're following. You want to be mindful of the colors that you're putting down. There's a phrase called fat over lean. And that basically means that in kind of the beginning, you want to use paint that is not only kind of thinly applied, but lean in its oil content. Whereas later on, the fat is kind of the oil paint that can be heavier, heavier bodied, or just heavier in, chromatic content or chemically content. It's just like you have to kind of follow that. Otherwise, your paintings can fall apart, maybe not necessarily in your lifetime. But if that is something that you're concerned about, like in my case, the majority of my work goes to private clients, and those are staying in their family or hopefully staying in their family for a very long time. And you want them to last. Where as someone like Norman Rockwell, who I absolutely love and adore, he did the majority of his stuff for commercial purposes, and he would do things with the paint that would compromise the longevity of the painting just because he needed to get this effect and needed to get this done to kind of create whatever it was that he was trying to create. And, a lot of his paintings now, they're falling apart. But, he's still a god to me, so... Either way, it's just something that you take into consideration, maybe more so with oil paint than you do, say, acrylic paint.
How long does it take for one of your paintings to cure enough to send it once you're done painting?
It takes a couple of weeks, because what I'll do is when a painting, let's say the last mark that I put on a painting, I'll let it sit for about a week or two before I do anything to it. And I'll bring it back onto the easel, and I'll what's called oiling it out, which means I'll kind of put, in my case, this bit of Galkid. It's basically just a thin layer of oil, but I'll brush that onto the canvas, and that'll kind of unify the surface. So any paint that is dried maybe like more matte than other paint, it'll all kind of just mesh together and be unified. But I'll put that on, and I'll let it sit for another week after that, and then I'll put on the final picture varnish, which, again, needs to sit for like a week. And I'll get it photographed, and then I'll send it out to the client. I think traditionally you kind of want to hang on to a painting for many months and have it finished for many months before you actually put on a final picture varnish. But I don't necessarily follow that rule as much as I probably should. What that is going to do to the paintings in the end, I don't think I'll be around to see it, but I'm hoping it's not going to make a huge difference. It's just, the whole thing is just, it's a long process.
I have a question about storage, because you've got these paintings that are done. You've got these paintings, you're working on them in the middle of the project. A lot of these are big. How are you storing this stuff?
Storage is a very loose term. You know what? Let me see if I can move the computer. You can actually get a view of how things are kind of stored.
Ooh, there's like four beautiful canvases right behind you, all in process. 5. I see 5 now, 6. As we pan by.
They're piles and piles
Wow.
and piles and stacks. I don't know how much more I can get without knocking over my entire life here.
But yeah, I mean, they're stacked in many different ways. I have shelves above me where I can keep smaller to medium-sized works kind of in progress that I'm not necessarily focusing on at the time. I have shelves over there that I can put like small 9x12s on that are just on board. But yeah, otherwise it's all precariously put against each other, and I kind of have to make sure that they sit and go together a certain way, because you don't want to like poke anything through the back of a stretched canvas, which the majority of the work is done on. So it's kind of a maze here in the studio, and it's a small studio. It's the smallest bedroom in our 3-bedroom apartment, so there's not a ton of room to begin with, but I try to make it work. It helps that the majority of the work is done on commission, so I can finish it, just get it out of here as soon as I can. The problem is, the moment I get something out, or a few somethings out, it's very Sisyphusian, because you get more coming in, which, is, you want that, because you want to be busy. You want to be able to, feed your family, make money, or whatever. But Yeah, it just, it's like never ending. I keep thinking, I want to have more room in the studio and I want to get all these done and out of here. But if I don't have anything else coming in, that also means that I'm in trouble. So it's a weird dichotomy.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned you work on commissions, and you've also mentioned earlier having a meeting with a client. So what is the commission process like? Do they just tell you, like, I want to see Babe Ruth at bat? Or is it more specific? Are there long meetings? Like, how do you figure that out?
I mean, it varies from person to person. There are some people who contact me and they might have an image in their head, whether it's like a famous photograph of Ruth or whomever. And they'll say, okay, I just want you to do a painting off of this. And that's fine. And those are usually kind of quick conversations. And there are some other clients who might have a subject in mind, but not exactly. They'll say, I want a painting of Babe Ruth. Can you show me some options? And I'll kind of talk with them and try to get an idea exactly of what they want. Do you want an action shot? Do you want something that's posed? Do you want something that's candid? Do you want just a portrait? Do you want full body? Do you want Ruth with the Red Sox early in his career? Do you want him with the Yankees? Do you want him towards the end of his Yankee run when he was kind of fat and Santa Claus-like? Do you want him on the Boston Braves? Do you just want me to kind of pick something that I think is dynamic, something that I would like to paint? And everyone is different. There are some clients who I never meet, who we kind of just do our business through email, and I'll write these, long tomes. Here's the painting, or here's the one that I want to do. I like this shot because of whatever. I think it'll make a great painting because of this and the light, and I'm really into that. And, I'll get back a reply of just like one sentence, like, okay, go for it. And that's it. And I'll do it. And that's, the contact that I have with them, which is totally fine. But there are other clients who want to get to know me more, and they want to kind of talk through their choices or whatever, which I personally love more so myself, just because I love meeting people who are passionate about the sport and passionate about art. So it's just, it just depends on the person, really.
So this is a very specific type of work, because you're not I don't mean just a painter as in just a painter, but like you're in a very specific category where you're painting a specific subject matter with like a historical bent for clients. How exactly did you get into this?
Well, I didn't invent it, but there were a few artists that I knew of who did this kind of work where the majority of it was kind of baseball based. And what happened was I'd kind of always been into baseball, had always been into drawing, and I ended up going to an art school here in Manhattan, and my expectation was actually to be a science fiction fantasy book cover illustrator, because that was kind of the stuff that I was into at the time. I guess I was doing the work there in school, and I was learning about being an illustrator and learning technique and things like that. And something happened where I just realized I wasn't as into the subject matter as I thought I needed to be, because I was thinking, if I'm going to be a science fiction fantasy illustrator, I'm going to be doing just these kinds of paintings, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on, and I should love the subject more than I did. I kind of floundered for a little bit after that, after I realized it wasn't really for me. And it wasn't until my senior year when in one of my classes, I was tasked with the assignment to illustrate a relationship. And the first thing that kind of came to my head, for whatever reason, was the relationship between a pitcher and a batter. And I ended up making a painting off of that notion. I got like really into the research, and I knew even then, I was kind of like, well, I know that Mickey Mantle needs to look like Mickey Mantle, and, he's hitting a ball at Ebbets Field. Ebbets Field needs to look like Ebbets Field. I just I took it seriously from the get-go, and it felt great. Like every way that I thought making art should feel like, that's how it felt. And, I did the painting, and the teacher liked it. It was a very positive reaction, and the students in the class really reacted positively to it, and it even got accepted into the annual Society of Illustrators student competition, which was like a big goal of mine at the time. But I wasn't thinking like, okay, well, maybe this is my route. I'm going to be doing, baseball paintings for clients for like private commissions. It was me still trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to do and like where it could fit into things. And what happened was I graduated and I was doing, more of these baseball paintings. But I wasn't really getting anywhere with them. I was living at home at the time with my parents, and I was like the proverbial, gremlin in the basement who was just kind of painting and living off his family or whatever. And, I realized I need to do something. I need to do something that's going to make me some money so I can like start my life, I guess, and get out. So I ended up going to Lehman College to get certified to teach art, because I figured that might be something I would enjoy. Both of my parents were teachers in the Bronx for 35 years, 30 plus years. And I went through the program. I did student teaching. I took all the classes. I did well. I enjoyed it. And my last year, like the last week of my last year, I had a very, very fortunate bit of press in that I had done an interview with a writer a couple months prior, a freelancer who was, she was going to pitch the story, I guess, about me and my work to somebody. And, this is in like, I think it was maybe late April, early May. She called me and she said, so, I sold the story and you're going to be in the New York Times, the Sunday section, art section of the New York Times. And I'm like, what? So that happened, and it kind of got things going from there. It got my work, I guess, in front of a lot of people and created interest. And I hooked up with an agent gallerist at the time, and he kind of helped jumpstart my career. That was in 2007, and I've been doing it ever since. I didn't have to go teach. I've just been doing this and like making a living off of it, and which boggles my mind to this day. I mean, still, even the fact that, that story about me being in the Times, that boggles my mind. I remember talking to one of my teachers about this at SVA, which is where I went for my undergrad work, and just saying, like, I have no business being in the New York Times. I'm 26, 27 years old at the time. You should be in the New York Times. Your work is important. You're amazing. I'm just like this little guy. And his response was something like, yeah, maybe, but you have this opportunity and it's great and you're doing something right, and follow it. And yeah, I guess I've been kind of like following it ever since, even though there's still a lot of imposter syndrome ruling my life, even to this day. But yeah, that's kind of how I singled in just on the baseball stuff. And I've been very lucky in that I haven't had to do any other kind of art, really. For a while, I kind of even considered taking on commission work for other sports, but I'm able to actually say no, which I never thought I would be in that position where, if someone wants to commission something for me and I don't want to do it, I can say no. I'm very lucky and don't belong here, but I'm going to keep faking it until I make it, I guess.
I think it is wildly untrue that you don't belong here. And I think your professor's advice was very good. I think you may have just answered it, or at least your New York Times story might be a candidate. But what's the coolest thing you've ever done in your work?
I mean, that was amazing. That was really amazing. There are a lot of things that have happened that are really kind of wonderful stories, and not even necessarily for like the work itself part of it. I think back, I did a large painting of Lou Gehrig giving his farewell address at Yankee Stadium, and a client ended up buying it. The painting was done on spec, actually, but the client ended up buying it, and he wanted to meet me. He lived in Southern California, and he flew me out to Southern California so he could have this unveiling of the painting in his office, and there was a big party or whatever. It was cool. It was really uncomfortable, just kind of like being in front of everyone and being like center of attention for a little bit. But the cool part about it was that right before I went to this opening, to this party, this unveiling, my wife had told me that she was pregnant. So that was like when I found out that I was going to be a dad, which, again, blew my mind. I remember being at this party and talking to people, and it felt like a dream, because I was there, but my mind was also not there at all. That was really cool, because even now it's like I speak to him, and like that client is always kind of tied to that memory of hearing about, my son for the first time. That definitely is up there. There's one thing that I come back to every now and then. There was a painting I did for Upfeller's museum out in Van Meter, Iowa, which is unfortunately no longer around. I'd done the painting for them, and I brought it to what's called the National, which is kind of like the largest like baseball card memorabilia convention. Happens every year, the end of July, beginning of August. And I brought it there. This was in Cleveland, and Feller was 91 maybe, or 90 at the time, and he was there at the show signing autographs and things like that. And I was able to kind of present the painting to him in person. And I remember that he, like, we did this in, I guess, the autograph pavilion or whatever, so it's kind of separate from the other booths and people or whatever. And his handler came out, and he came out, and he looks at the painting, and, he was this old guy at the time, and very, like, gruff, and sometimes a bit abrasive, but, a very honest and really, lovely man. And he looks at the painting, and he kind of stammers a little bit, and he says, that's the best damn painting I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really nice of him to say. And the part that he loved about it was this painting depicted him throwing a no-hitter on opening day in 1940. At the time, he was the first and only person to do that. And he said, looking at the photo, he's like, you got that day right. There weren't that many fans there. It was incredibly cold that day. Your painting looks like that cold day. And that was like, oh man, that was what I wanted to hear. That was my love language. So just hearing that like from the actual source was really cool.
If you're an author, you could have that as your pull quote.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the blurb.
Yes. What do you think people get wrong about your job?
What do they get wrong? That's a good question. Well, apparently some people think that maybe I use AI with some of my work, which we were talking about earlier, which is weird, but that's wrong. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand everything that kind of goes into a painting, or at least one of my paintings, how long it takes, how involved of a process it is, and how kind of insane I get when it comes to certain aspects of it. I think it kind of surprises them when they find out how long these things can take. I think one thing that a lot of people do kind of assume is that I regularly sell reproductions of my work, just because I think a lot of artists who kind of work in this space, who work in the sports art industry, sell reproductions, and a lot of them do it, I don't know if illegally is the right word, but in order to sell reproductions of stuff like that, it's very important to obtain the proper licenses in order to do so, whether that comes from MLB itself, or the Players Association, or player estates, or in my case, a place like Getty or AP who licensed the photographs to me. So there are a lot of legal hurdles that I have to jump through in order to make that happen. So I've done, in the past couple of years, I've done 2 giclées. Giclées are just, like really high-end fine art prints. And I've had to do that, where I've had, with each giclée, I've had to kind of go through the whole rigmarole of obtaining the proper license to be able to do that. And, I do it because, A, I don't want to be sued, because, I don't want to infringe on someone else's IP, but I also, feel that these people they deserve to be paid for their work. What's interesting about this, and, you can certainly talk about this too, in that, like when you go to a Comic-Con and you go to an artist alley or whatever, and you see that people are selling sketches, prints, or whatever of Marvel characters, DC characters, and it's kind of like a common practice that these companies kind of turn a blind eye to that because those artists don't necessarily get compensated the way that they should be, so they're allowed to have this other career by doing that. But it's not like that in my sector. I think that I know that a lot of people have been gone after, like, by lawyers and whatnot, but there are also plenty of people who fly underneath the radar and just don't do the licensing thing, which is fine. But I in good conscience just couldn't do that myself.
That makes a lot of sense. What is the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is probably not getting overwhelmed by everything. The painting itself, the drawing itself, that stuff, not that it's easy, but it's manageable. Like, I know that I can do it, and I can make something look as good as I can do, and I'm always trying to be better, but I have a hard time not getting overwhelmed over anything. Again, like we were talking about that earlier, where I'm very lucky because I'm very busy, and I have a lot of commission work, and I have a very long backlog, and I'm so grateful for that, and I never take for granted how lucky I am. But at the same time, I get overwhelmed by it because I know that a lot of people have put their trust in me, and they've paid me money or deposits to make these paintings happen, and I want to get them done. I want to get them done right and as perfectly as I can. And sometimes it's just kind of hard to breathe and just take my time and say that I'll get to it when I get to it, and when I do get to it, you will love it, because it becomes overwhelming. And then even though I'm as busy as I am, I've been telling people how long of a wait it is for, like, a new commission or whatever, and I'll tell them the timeline, which is an absurd number, but still I'm thinking, like, all right, but what am I going to do then? What if I don't have any work? Like, it's like, this is it. I have these paintings and nothing new is going to come in. I'm just sure that, like, someone's going to show up at my front door knocking with a clipboard saying, well, Greg, you've been, an artist for 15, 20 years or whatever, and time to stop dicking around and time to get a real job. I'm just kind of like waiting for that. In the back of my head, I know it's going to happen. I mean, I hope it doesn't, but yeah, that's the fear.
That is what we call the fear of the freelancer.
Yes.
Just, oh, is this the last job I'm ever going to have?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I have a really hard time, like, not being overwhelmed by it. I do try to be gung-ho and stay positive, but I think it's in my nature to kind of worry and be neurotic about this sort of thing.
On swinging to the other side for our last job-related question, what is your favorite part of your job?
Oh, man. There are a lot of favorite parts. I really love meeting people and talking to them about baseball and about art, about, their stories with the game, whether they're talking about going to games with their father or whatever, or their mother, or even if they have, like, a personal relationship with the player, or if they're talking about the collection that they have of memorabilia or whatever. I love that. I love the fact that it's never the same. Like, no painting is really ever the same. Even if I'm painting, I've painted Babe Ruth many, many times. But each painting is different, and I can always find something new and exciting about each painting. What else? I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I love having, the freedom to go out and meet clients and have lunch, like go to Katz's Deli downtown and meet someone who's in from, like, North Dakota or whatever, and talk about painting And like that's my job. I get to research baseball stuff. I get to watch home movies. I can watch games. I can dig through microfilm or like newspaper archives, and like it's my job to learn about this stuff. I love that. I love the fact that I'm creating something with my hands. There's a sense of accomplishment that comes with that I think, people like you and I are really lucky to kind of be able to do that, especially in this day and age. Yeah, I don't know if anything, like I can't think of anything that kind of trumps it all. There's a lot to kind of really enjoy. I'm always, so grateful that I love the subject matter that I'm painting, and I've never really had a strong desire to do anything else with my artwork. I know that a lot of people who are in this space do stuff that is not related to baseball, and they kind of, like to kind of dabble in a lot of different things. But I actually like the fact that I am very happy with doing nothing but baseball paintings, and if that's what I'm known for in the end, professionally, then I'm okay with that. So yeah, it's not the quick answer that you probably wanted, but yeah, that's what it is. It's just kind of everything.
It's a great answer nonetheless. Thank you so much for your time, Graig. And where can people find you online and learn more about your work?
You can find me at my website, which is graigkreindler.com, just my name. But you have to note the funky spelling, GraigKreindler. And I am on most social media platforms. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, or X, whatever it's called, and Instagram, even on TikTok, though I post less frequently on that. Blue Sky, Threads, whatever. I try to be all over the place. But I feel like as long as you spell my name somewhat correctly, you get even close to it, you can find me.
Great. So everybody look up Graig's work. And that's it for this week on the Interesting Jobs podcast, where we chat with people with interesting jobs. If you liked this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you have an interesting job or know someone with one, email us and let us know. We might even be able to have you on the show.